it's Liz. Today we're going to be talking about the Pentecostal movement. Um, Obviously, the first Pentecostal Holy Spirit movement is Acts chapter 2, and that's undisputed. Like, you can't dispute that. This new wave of the Pentecostal Holy Spirit movement can be linked back to the 1900s with a guy named Charles Parham. And basically, he had a student that he prayed over, and she ended up speaking in tongues. And it just set the groundwork for the new Pentecostal movement. The biggest name, I think, is probably the most important, is William J. Seymour. He is the one that started the Azua, Azua revival. And I would say it was definitely the biggest spark for the Pentecostal movement. His revival nights ended up having people come listen to him speak, preach, and they would go back and start their own churches. And then, of course, people under that started their own. And Seymour just started, he didn't start it, but he definitely fed the Pentecostal movement in the 1900s. And he did this by just preaching and people loving it and experiencing it and wanting to share it, so that ear to mouth translation is pretty much every bit of what made this grow. And I just think that's really awesome that he did it just the old-fashioned way. I guess is just really empowering, and it's just a beauty in it, because nowadays everything is, you can do it through social media and you can get heard so much easier. But having these revivals and these meetings every day of the week and influencing all these people who started their own churches, who spread the Pentecost movement across the world, is just really beautiful. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of devotion, and it's a lot of giving yourself up to God and the Holy Spirit. And that's just, like I said, it's just really beautiful. It's really empowering as well. Honestly, I could say the biggest improvement, this is not improvement, but the biggest way this has affected me is definitely how the Pentecost movement split into a charismatic movement. And this has affected me the most because it impacts worship. It impacts how we interact with God. It impacts just the whole Christian faith in general. And I think that's just really powerful. I think the Holy Spirit is definitely extremely important, and I really want to say necessary in a healthy Christian faith. The most fun, though, is that the Holy Spirit is awesome and he can wreck you. And that's awesome if you've ever been wrecked by the Holy Spirit. But worshiping with the Holy Spirit and not standing there reading a hymn book, and you get to experience just the Holy Spirit is so powerful. And I personally grew up Baptist, and I don't understand why they don't want it or they dismiss it. And it's just learning, being a part of a current charismatic church just wrecked me. It wrecked my life, and I don't understand why some people don't like this. Personally, I get it though. Like, I get how it can be daunting or intimidating or kind of embarrassing as well. But like I said, I just don't understand why you don't want it. So walking into that, I cannot say that every Christian should live this way. It might not be for everyone. It pushes barriers. It can shock you if you experience some crazy churches. It can seem wild. It can seem embarrassing. So I could honestly say maybe it's not for everyone. I personally don't have it in me to say this is the way that you gotta be. That's just not me. You need to find your own relationship with Jesus, and honestly, there is no book standard for your faith walk. It is personal. It's definitely very personal, and it's something you have to choose for yourself. Whether you believe certain things, you switch to Catholicism, where it's very rigid structure, where it's charismatic, where it's very loose and more free and based on more relationship than rules. It's just all personal, and it's just all down to personal choice, what you're comfortable with, what you believe in. So like I said, I just can't tell people that it's the way. Would I encourage people to consider it? Most definitely. It's just, I feel like being more charismatic and Pentecostal, relying on the Holy Spirit, tongues, believing in spiritual gifts, crazy worship is important. And I would definitely recommend people consider it for sure. And then definitely a couple of tidbits of fact that I think churches and people should know is that we can thank our current Pentecostal movement to an African American preacher. I think that's really important. Another thing that J.C. Moore did, he integrated his revival nights. Broke society standards. So not only was he preaching to white people, he integrated his services. And I think that's really important in church history, and I think more people need to know that church history. Another thing about another tidbit fact that I think is important to know is that the Pentecostal movement was the first church branch, denomination, whatever you want to call it, to ordain women. And it can go back to Seymour letting women preach at his revival nights. So I just really think it's important for people to know that the Pentecostal movement is definitely owed to an African American preacher and then eventually women. And I think it's empowering to know this history. And it's empowering to know that we can keep this standard going and break barriers and produce new norms within the church. And yeah, I just really like those facts because it broke every societal norm, and I'm all about it. So definitely thanks for listening. All right, bye.